Hello and welcome to Tap That MTG, the show where we tell you everything we know about Magic the Gathering that's probably wrong, but fun to talk about. I'm Leslie.
And I'm Shauna.
And today we are here for another pre-con deep dive. We have some wonderful commanders coming out with the Crimson Vow release. And today's is going to be all about vampires. And so, what we're going to do is tell you about the deck, what it's supposed to do, give you a little breakdown of how commander decks are typically put together. And then we're going to compare this deck to that typical formation, see how it stacks up. And if you make it all the way to the end, we have some tweaks for you of how we think that
Sure do.
you could possibly make this deck a little bit better. So, Shauna, tell us about who this commander is and what this deck is supposed to do.
Well, Leslie, this is Strefan, the Morer progenitor. He is a vampire noble. What could be better than that? Vampire nobles. Excellent.
Nothing.
Nothing. So for 2 and a black and a red, it's a 3/2 flyer that at the beginning of your end step, you get to create a blood token for each player who lost life this turn. And whenever Strefan attacks, you may sacrifice 2 blood tokens. If you do, you may put a vampire card from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking as well. So, and that gains indestructible until end of turn. So,
Mm-hmm.
this deck is all about having lots and lots of vampires. You'll notice that there's some expensive vampires in here. If you can play them for free, that's amazing. The blood tokens also have a little side thing that might be useful, but with this deck, you probably don't want to do it unless you're desperate. But blood token gives you the ability to tap it and sack it, and then you discard a card and draw a card. So similar to the whole Angie deck of discarding things and stuff. So this deck has a lot of thinking going on, a lot of decisions to be made, which is one of the things I really like about this deck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also lots of creatures turning sideways doing damage, which I really love. So,
And yeah, and I didn't realize that this deck has for each player who lost life this turn, and that includes you. So if you dinged yourself,
true.
or if you just swing at everybody, if you've gone wide with your vampires, or if you have effects like Blood Artist that each player loses life or whatever,
Yeah.
that's kind of really great because you can do damage to everyone each turn and get benefit from it. I hadn't realized that
Sure
until you just
thing.
read that out loud.
Yeah, so that's really another way to get those lots of blood tokens. I've been
Mm,
playing Olivia on Arena and
mm.
some vampire stuff shenanigans, and sometimes I have like 8 blood tokens, so
Yeah.
that's really nice. So
So a little bit easier to get than we first
yeah,
initially thought when we
that's
were
kind of
looking
yeah,
at this deck. So
exactly,
that's great.
exactly.
So if we look at the breakdown of this deck, we have actually a fairly high mana curve. That is because you're going to hopefully be playing those vampires for free with your blood token and your
Mhm.
commander. You're going to need to protect your commander in order to do that and really try and take advantage of those blood tokens in order to make that happen. Color breakdown, we have 31 black cards,
Mm.
18 red cards, 9 colorless. Those are your mana dorks and mana rocks. And then 5 multicolored cards. So very heavy on the black in this deck.
Mhm.
Which is good. We all love black. Creature types, we have 36 card types. We have 36 creatures, 14 instants and sorceries, 4 enchantments, and 9 artifacts. So it's
Lots.
very creature heavy deck. Again, you're going to try and go wide, swing lots, and kill everybody with vampires fast, hopefully sucking their life. So you're going to want to be aggressive when you play
Yeah,
this deck.
definitely.
So what does a typical or a commander deck look like, Shauna?
Well, we follow this little formula that you found a long time ago now, but seems to be the way Wizards build their decks as well as the way we do. So, commander, of course, you have your commander. Then you have about 15 ramp cards, 15 removal. So that could be uh, targeted removal or just board wipe type removal. Card draw, about 13 of those. 12 high impact cards. Those are cards that are going to win you the game or make a huge change to the game state. And other on theme cards or other win conditions. There's about 10 of those in there. So those are your supporting cards as well. They help you win the game. And about 34 lands is what we generally try to have.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So all of these sections can also fluctuate. Lots of
Yes.
people look at 34 lands and go, what? Only 34? A lot of the
Yeah.
commander decks come out with 37, 38, sometimes 40
Mhm.
land. These ones are no different, although they're, I think, a little bit more on par for what we like to put for land. You're just going to have to play with that based on your mana curve and what you like. And that brings us to our first section, which is ramp and mana generators. If you have enough ramp and mana generators in your deck, then you maybe don't need as much land. So the formula that we like to use says you should have 15. This deck only has 10, but remember, we are going to be playing our stuff for free, hopefully. So our commander in and of itself is kind of a mana ramp, a mana generator, because you're kind of reducing the cost.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Scion of Opulence is 2 and a red for a 3/1 vampire noble. So 3/1 automatically says it's going to be an aggressive card. You're going to want to swing with it instead of block with it. And whenever this card or another non-token vampire you control dies, you get to create a treasure token. So there's where the ramp comes in. You're going to create treasures if your vampires die. You can also pay 1 and sacrifice 2 artifacts, which could be your treasures, and exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Whenever it says you may play that card this turn, that means you still have to pay for it. If it's free, then you'll be able to, it'll say you may play that card this turn without paying its mana cost.
Yeah,
so
good point. Good point. The Nirkana Revenant is a 4/4 no, it's not flying. It should be.
Should be.
For 6, 4 and 2 black. This is one of those expensive vampire shades, but whenever you tie up a swamp for mana, you get to add an additional swamp. So that's going to be good. And you can pay 1 swamp and give this dude +1/+1 until end of turn. So you have a whole bunch of extra black mana. What a great place to dump it into is this big thing.
And you can do that as many times as you want. So because it's tapping your swamp, each swamp taps for 2 instead. Whenever you tap 1, you're automatically putting 2 1/1 count, or gets +2/+2 until the end of turn instead of +1/+1. Cool. That's nice.
Yeah.
Strongkirk Occultist is another vampire horror, a 3/2, another aggressive card. It has trample. When it deals combat damage to a player, you get to exile the top card of your library until the end of turn. You may play that card. It has madness, which allows you to pay 2 and then discard it into exile, and when you do, you can cast it for its madness cost. So basically you're going to discard this. Anytime you can discard a card, you can discard this card and then for its madness cost, you can play it. So it makes it a little bit cheaper to play if you use this as one of your cards that you're going to discard.
Yeah. Which you're going to try to do if you can.
Yeah, exactly. Although it's not very expensive, so.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we have the Arcane Signet for 2. That's our mana rock, as well as the Charcoal Diamond and the Fire Diamond. Those 2 enter tapped, and then they could be the black or the red. So there's some artifacts that help you ramp up a little bit. Yeah, and then we've got some other ones in there too. I'll let Leslie talk about those.
Sure. Commander Sphere is also a nice little mana rock. We see this in a lot of commander decks. It's just going to tap for 1 of any color. Rakdos Signet is right up there as well. You can pay 1 and tap it for 2. So essentially it's just like having either or of those lands, and you can just kind of treat it like that. And what about the next 2, Shauna?
Well, Soul Ring, it's so nice that they've been putting Soul Rings into these commander decks. So that has been a very, very useful tool. If you pay 1 and you get 2 mana. I mean, everybody wants to turn 1 Soul Ring. And then we have the Unstable Obelisk, which is another colorless rock. But this one has the nice little side benefit of paying 7 and sacrificing it, and you get to destroy something. So it's a little bit of a removal on a mana dork as well.
Yeah.
So
It's always nice when you have things that do more than one thing, right?
Exactly.
So our next section is removal. This is, in my opinion, and I think Shauna agrees, one of the most important sections in any
Mhm.
magic deck, not just commander decks. Our formula says 15, and our deck has what we figure about 12. Now, there are some high impact cards that also have removal
Definitely.
as well. So there is some fluctuation. And in fact, you can get rid of all of these categories and just go all high impact if you really want to, if they still fit into all these categories. But let's talk about the just removal cards. So Midnight Arsonist is 3 and a red for a 3/2. And when it enters the battlefield, you get to destroy up to X target artifacts without mana abilities, where X is the number of vampires you control. So you're going to have lots of vampires. You can destroy that many target artifacts without mana abilities. So you can't destroy their soul rings or their arcane signets. But if they have some equipment or if they have some other artifacts that are doing some nice things for them, then you can destroy. It is a bit situational, but it's always good to have some artifact removal in a deck.
Yeah. Then we have Anawan, the Ruin Sage. It's a 4/3 for 3 and 2 black, a vampire shaman. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player sacrifices a non-vampire creature. So you're pretty safe in most cases. Most of your creatures are vampires. You might have some bats that you might have to sacrifice, but there's a benefit to sacrificing bats. You'll see that later.
Mm-hmm. Our buddy Anawan, he's now a vampire. I
Yeah.
don't know. Dark Imposter, a 2 and a black for a little 2/2. But this one, once it's on the battlefield, you can pay 4 and 2 black, which is really expensive. But you can exile a target creature and put a 1/1 counter on Dark Imposter. It has all activate abilities of all creature cards exiled with it. So they have something on the battlefield, you have something on the battlefield that you want to kind of give the ability to this guy and make him bigger at the same time. It's just gonna be morph into, it's kind of like mutate, isn't it? It's just gonna morph into this monster where you have a bunch of different things attached to it.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. And maybe exile something, I don't know, give things, I don't know. I was thinking hexproof, but then you couldn't target it, so just ignore me. But
That's the first thing that popped to your mind. That's okay.
First thing that popped to my mind.
Damn dragons or something.
Yeah.
I really like the art on that one too. It's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Stealing the guy's clothes.
He's at the bottom of the stairs.
Yeah. Patron of the Vein. It's a 4/4 flyer for 4 and 2 black. And it's been around for a little while. One of my favorite vampires. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target creature an opponent controls. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, exile it and put a 1/1 counter on each vampire you control. Vampire you control.
Yeah. So this one very much could be high impact. It probably could have been in that because it has flying. It gets 1/1 counters for each vampire you control, and it destroys. But yeah, we put it in here because, destroy.
It's destroy.
Blood Tithe Harvester for black and a red is a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, you get to create a blood token. So here we go. We finally have something that's going to create some blood tokens for us that work with our commander. You can tap and sacrifice this card, and target creature gets -X until the end of turn, where X is twice the number of blood tokens that you control.
Yeah.
So automatically it is going to give something -2/2 if you just sacrifice it right away. Well, I guess you can't sacrifice it until the next turn, but activate only as a sorcery. So that's super good as you start to get blood tokens and they start having things that are really big. So
yeah, he does some work. I was surprised at how much work he does.
Yeah.
Olivia's Wrath for 4 and a black. It is a lovely sorcery where you, for each non-vampire creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of vampires you control. That's insane. It's going to do a lot of damage for you.
Always good to have a removal that removes everybody else's stuff and not yours, right?
Yes, that's right. Goodbye, everyone.
Right? Addisons Judgment for 1 and a red is a sorcery. This has madness as well, so if you happen to discard it, you can pay 1 and X for it. Addisons Judgment deals 2 damage divided as you choose among any number of targets, but if you used its madness cost, then you can deal X damage divided as you choose. So again, you're going to probably want to play this for its madness cost if you can. If not, it'll do at least 2 damage divided as you choose. So,
yep, it's pretty good. Then we have Blasphemous Act. So this is a kind of a dangerous card to have, but when you need it, you need it. For 8 and a red, the spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. This is going to be a board wipe, folks. So it's going to be cheap, and it's going to deal 13 damage to each creature.
Yeah. And if you have Blood Artist on the battlefield, then you can potentially take someone out if you have lots of vampires. So sometimes you want to kill all your own creatures.
There's a new werewolf. I'm just going to do a little side note here. There's a new werewolf that when it's nighttime, any of your creatures that are dealt damage, you deal that much damage to any target.
Nice.
That would be fun.
Sometimes vampires and werewolves work together, Twilight.
Sometimes.
So Mob Rule is a sorcery for 4 and 2 red. You get to choose one. You can gain control of all creatures with a power 4 or greater until the end of turn. Untap those creatures. They gain haste until the end of turn. Swingy, swingy. Or you can gain control of all creatures with power 3 or less until the end of turn. Untap those creatures. They gain haste until the end of turn. So, nice way to steal people's things. You're just going to steal everything on the battlefield depending on what is more and swing away.
Sacrifice them if you can, too, when you're done.
Yeah.
That's nice. Then we have the good old Feed the Swarm for 1 and a black. It is a little sorcery that says destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. So that's helpful. Used many times.
Vandal Blast for 1, destroy target artifact you don't control. This one also has Overload for 4 and a red, which means that you can cast the spell for its overload cost instead. If you do, you change its text to replace all instances instead of target with each. So instead of destroying target artifact, you destroy each target or each artifact. Yeah, that you don't control. Yeah,
crazy.
Which can come in handy.
Yes. Rakdos Charm for a black and a red. It's a standby little instant that choose 1, exile all cards from target player's graveyard, destroy a target artifact, or each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. Oh my, that could be bad. Whatever you need.
Yeah, exactly. Versatility. Card draw and tutors is our next section. We like to put around 13 in. This deck has 10, so we're really close and right on par there. So these are things that are going to draw you cards or let you go search for cards. Crossway Troublemakers is our first one. Now this is again a fairly expensive card for 6, but it is a 5/5, and attacking vampires you control have Death Touch and Lifelink, which is fantastic. But whenever a vampire you control dies, you may pay 2 life. If you do, you draw a card. So all your vampires have lifelink. They have Death Touch. Hopefully nobody's going to want to block them. If they do, they're going to kill their creatures. But they also have lifelink, so you can afford the 2 life and then draw a card. So it's a nice little card when you get it on the battlefield for sure.
Blood Tracker for 3 and a black. It's a 2/2, really useful vampire wizard that you're going to have counters on fairly easily. It's a 2/2 flyer, and you can pay black and pay 2 life and put a 1/1 counter on Blood Tracker. So you can do that more than once if you want to. When it leaves the battlefield, you then draw a card for each +1 counter on it. So it's just a really strong card.
Champion of the Dusk, classic vampire knight, 3 and 2 black for a 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, you draw X cards, you lose X life, where X is the number of vampires you control. Doesn't matter how much life you lose, you're going to gain it back. So,
Angie's Ravager for 2 and a red. It's a 3/3 that attacks each turn if able. And whenever it attacks, you can discard your hand and then draw 3 cards. So if you have no cards, that's certainly helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It also has a madness cost of 1 and a red. So that's a really easy way to play it. And there's some discarding happening. So, yeah.
So Predator's Hour is a fun one. It's only cost 2, which is really cheap. Until the end of turn, creatures you control gain menace, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of that player's library face down. You may look at and play that card for as long as it remains in exile, and you may spend mana as though it's any mana to cast that card. So if you have tons of vampires, it's for each of those vampires that does damage. So swing at lots of different players, get a second hand going over there, and it doesn't matter when, but you can cast those cards for any mana. So,
and you get to know what it is, but the player doesn't, right?
yeah, it's secret. They're face down. Yeah. So harder to play on stream and online, but easy to play in person.
Exactly. Imposing Grandeur. I love the art on this one too. For 4 and a red, it's a sorcery. Each player may discard their hand and draw cards equal to the greatest mana value of a commander they own on the battlefield or in the command zone. So this is one of those political cards that Leslie likes so much. Everybody gets cards. Why not?
Just going to help everyone out. And I love that it's in the command zone or on the battlefield. So it doesn't matter. You will have it. And it's a May. So if they don't want to discard their hand, they don't have to. So that's just a nice card for everybody.
Yeah.
Damnable Pact. For X and 2 black, target player draws X cards and loses X life. Again, you're going to target yourself. Well, that's not true. This could be a game finisher that you could remove someone from the game with this. If you have enough mana, just allow them to draw X cards and lose that much life. Or if you need that draw yourself, then you can use it yourself. So there's some versatility in that card as well.
Ancient Craving for 3 and a black. It's a sorcery that lets you draw 3 cards and you lose 3 life. Oh, well.
Oh, well. Although there is a lot of like draw some cards and lose some life. So be careful. You don't want to get yourself down to like 12 and like you wanted some life gain here too. Yeah. Night Whisperer for 1 and a black. You draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. So again, drawing cards, losing life.
Mm-hmm. Underworld Connections is a handy little enchantment that you can stick on a land, and your land has the ability to tap it and pay 1 life and draw a card. So really helpful when you need it.
Mm-hmm. And that is the end of our card draw section.
Yeah.
I get to introduce all the sections today, apparently. Every section. So the next one is our high impact cards. Our formula says 12. We figure there's about 16, which is good. That means they do multiple things and may fit in other categories, which is fantastic. The first one is one of both of our favorites. Butcher of Malkir for 5 and 2 black, flying. And when Butcher of Malkir or another creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So it doesn't matter now that you're being aggressive with your vampires, because if your vampires die, then your opponents have to sacrifice creatures. So, yeah, it's great.
And you don't care if your stuff dies generally.
No.
All right. Shadowgrange Archfiend for 6 and a black. It's an expensive 8/4 demon, not a vampire. So keep that in mind. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures they control. You gain life equal to the greatest power among creatures sacrificed this way. That is such a good card. It's got basically 2 cards in one. A creature and then that soul sanctuary card that makes people sacrifice. Mm-hmm. And it has a madness cost though, folks, for 2 and a black, and you have to pay 8 life, but you're going to gain it all back anyways. So
yeah, gain it all back and remove some stuff. So you can do that early game or late game. That's nice.
Yeah.
Markov Enforcer for 4 and 2 red is a 6/6. When Markov Enforcer or another vampire enters the battlefield under your control, Markov Enforcer fights up to one target creature an opponent controls. So it's a 6/6. It's going to fight something, kill something, hopefully. And whenever a creature is dealt damage by Markov Enforcer that dies this turn, you get to create a blood token. So we have the added benefit of also creating blood tokens with this guy. So he's going to do some work for you with this Dex theme for sure.
Then there's the Cordial Vampire for 2 black. It's a 1/1 little dude. Whenever it or another creature dies, put a 1/1 counter on each vampire you control. Yikes.
Yeah. And we put it in high impact because it says each.
I've played with that card before. It's so good in a vampire deck.
So good. So Necropolis Region for 3 and 3 black, so 6. It's a 6/5 flying. And when a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put that many 1/1 counters on it. So you're just going to be making your creatures, your vampires, bigger and bigger with this card out on the battlefield. Going to do some work.
Yeah. And then Sanctum Seeker, 3/4 for 2 and 2 black. In a vampire deck. This is tremendous because whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. So that's before any sort of combat damage happens. You're just going to suck life away from them and gain a bunch of life. This is such a strong card in a vampire deck.
And it's each opponent, so it does lots. And if we go back to our commander, remember, however many opponents lost life this turn, you get to create blood tokens, which are then going to help you play your vampires for free. So this is a perfect card for this deck. Lots of great synergy. Vampire Nighthawk, just a classic 3/3, but it does have flying, death touch, and lifelink. Remember, we want to gain some life. It's got flying, so it's going to do some work for you. We always love this card in any vampire deck.
Yeah. And Blood Artist is the typical vampire that that has to be in this kind of a deck for 1 and a black. It's a 0/1. Whenever it or another creature dies, any creature, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Does a huge amount of work, surprisingly. They have to get rid of it.
And look at the art in this next card. This nice fountain of, I'm sure it's red wine. We have a little indulgent aristocrat, 1/1 for 1. It has lifelink, and you can pay 2 and sacrifice a creature to put a 1/1 counter on each vampire you control. Again, we put it in high impact because it's each vampire. And you can just keep doing that as much as you want, which is fantastic.
Yeah, sacrifice all those creatures you stole or something like that, right?
Yeah,
or your own, it doesn't matter.
I think there's a lot of cards that make like little 1/1 vampires too.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Strongkirk Captain for 1 and a black and a red. It's a 2/2 first strike. Other vampire creatures you control get +1/+1 and have first strike. So just first strike death touchers. Why not?
Yeah. Lifelink first strike left death touchers. Wow. Stensia Masquerade for 2 and a red is an enchantment. Attacking creatures you control have first strike. So if you don't have that guy on the battlefield, you can have this one or this enchantment on the battlefield. And then whenever a vampire you control deals combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter on it. It also has the ability to cast it for its madness cost, which is the same. So Shauna, tell me why I would want to cast it for its madness cost instead then.
Specifically because you can get that whole, like you can discard a card it's just useful to be able to discard a card and pay instead of you get
right, because there's some cards that require you to discard and it's like, well, this gives you some versatility, I guess, that it costs the same, but you can use it.
It's a strong card. They don't want you to have it cheaper.
Yeah, that's fair.
Timothar, the Baron of Bats, a vampire noble. So this is the bat dude I was talking about. So 4/4 for 4 and 2 black. It has ward. They have to discard a card to, so it comes with some protection. And whenever another non-token vampire you control dies, you may pay 1 and exile it. If you do, you get to create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying. It gains when this creature deals combat damage to a player, you sacrifice it and return the exiled card to the battlefield tapped. So your vampires never really die.
No.
Just turn into bats.
Wow. So yeah, basically they're just going to kind of like go into the darkness and then come back later after their bat dies.
Yep.
Camber the Plunderer for 3 and a black. This is a partner card for it's a 3/4. Partnered means that you get to go search for its partner when it comes into the battlefield. So Lorene the Diversion is who you're going to go search for. I'll talk about her in a second, but this guy, he has lifelink, and he also has the ability that whenever a creature dies, you gain 1 life and create a blood token. So again, we're wanting to create blood tokens. You gain a life whenever a creature dies. And then Lorene the Diversion has first strike, and she has a similar ability, but she's going to help you on the other side of that. You can pay 2, sacrifice an artifact or creature to goad target creature. So goad means that they have to attack with that creature next turn, and they have to attack somebody that's not you, which is great for removal, either player removal or creature removal, because they have to swing with that thing they didn't want to swing with. And you're sacrificing a creature, which then allows the blood token and the gaining life to happen. So these two work really well together. By themselves, they're not super powerful, but together they are super high impact.
Yeah, having creatures die is good for you.
Yeah.
Malachor Blood Witch it's a 4/4 flyer that has protection from white. It's for 3 and 2 black. It is when it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses life equal to the number of vampires you control, and you gain life equal to the life lost this way. So each opponent. So if you have 3 opponents and you have just 3 vampires, God forbid, they each lose 3 life, but you gain 9.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And hopefully you'll have way more than that.
Oh yeah.
And you'll kill them all. You'll do 20
So
damage
just
and
for
gain
vampires,
60, whatever.
Right.
Rakish Air for 2 and a red is a 2/2, and whenever a vampire you control deals combat damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter on it. So we're just going to keep making our vampires super big.
Yes, there's a few. You've noticed there's a few vampires that get that ability.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So then we have other cards on theme, special cards that just help support the deck overall. Then we have, the formula says about 10 of those. The deck has 14, so these could be moved around a little bit too. Bloodlord of Vazgoth is our first one. It's for 3 and 2 black, a 3/3 that has Bloodthirst of 3. So that means that if an opponent was dealt damage this turn, this creature enters the battlefield with 3+1 counters on it. So it's a flyer. So you really are going to want to play this after combat, right? Or after you swing and Sanctum Sanctuary is out there, or some way that the opponent has lost life before you play this guy to make it worthwhile. But also, whenever you cast a vampire creature spell, it gains Bloodthirst as well. So swinging away and then you just play a whole bunch of vampires after that, that's pretty awesome. So
And they get counters. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of like vampire slivers or something like that.
Yeah.
Strongkirk the Condemned for 2 is a 2/2, and you can discard a card. So again, the cost is to discard a card. You're going to discard one of your madness cards, so that you can cast it as well. But vampires you control get +1/+1 until the end of turn. You can only activate this one each turn. So once this is on the battlefield, then it's really easy to use your madness.
Bloodsworn Steward. It's for 2 and 2 red, a 4/4 flyer, and commander creatures you control get +2/+2 and have haste. So you really want your guy to be out there, your commander to be out there and have haste. That's pretty awesome.
Another good support card is Crimson Honor Guard for 3 and 2 red, a 4/5. It has trample, and then at the beginning of each player's end step, Crimson Honor Guard deals 4 damage to that player unless they control a commander. So if they don't have their commander on the battlefield, they're losing 4 life at the beginning of each player's end step.
Too bad.
Every single end step.
Yeah. Vampiric Dragon. It's a 5/5 for 6 and a black and a red flying dragon, but it's a vampire dragon, which is cool. So he has all the vampire benefits. Whenever a creature dealt damage by this big boy dies, you get to put a 1/1 counter on the big boy. So yeah, why not? But then it's you got a little extra bonus here for 1 and a red. It deals 1 damage to target creature. So, ping a bunch of things off and away you go. It's a big boy.
And then Falcon Rav Gorger for one, it's a 2/1. Each vampire creature card you own that isn't on the battlefield has madness. The madness cost is equal to the mana cost. So suddenly everything in your hand has madness.
That makes it worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
Bloodline Necromancer for 4 and a black. It's a 3/2 with lifelink, and when it enters the battlefield, you may return target vampire or wizard creature card from the graveyard to the battlefield. So bring them on back. Let's do it again.
Mm-hmm. Classic Falconwrath Noble for 3 and a black is a 2/2. It's got flying, and when he or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So that one's very much like Blood Artist. And then it's or another creature. So they're creatures as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Then we've got Sinister Waltz with this really cool art here for 3 black and a red sorcery that is choose 3 target creature cards in your graveyard, return 2 of them at random to the battlefield, and put the other on the bottom of your library. Again, getting stuff back. Yay.
Yay. And then you might have, because you're a vampire, you've had a very long commander game, you might have the urge to feed. For 2, it's an instant. Target creature gets -3/-3 until the end of turn. You may tap any number of untapped vampire creatures you control. If you do, put a 1/1 counter on each of those vampires. So the -3/-3 may be negligible. You might not be able to give any target anything, but it has this added benefit. So it has the potential to be fairly high impact card, but it's situational. So that's why it's in this section.
Then we have this cool glass cast heart, cool, creepy
Look at
artifact for 2 and a black. It's a new card, I believe. Whenever 1 or more vampires you control attack, you create a blood token. So yeah, that's pretty cool. But you can also pay a black and tap it and pay 1 life and create a 1/1 white and black vampire creature token with lifelink. So that's fun. Or you can pay 2 black and sacrifice this strange thing. And 13, if you sacrifice 13 blood counter or blood tokens, each opponent loses 13 life and you gain 13 life. Oh, finish the game.
I love this one too because it works really well with this deck. In fact, it gets you the vampires that you need to sacrifice. It creates your blood tokens. If you end up putting any tutors or anything like that in this deck and you get a chance to go tutor, this card is going to bring everything together, even though it seems pretty innocuous. So it's a really good support card, but there's only 1 of them, so you may or may not get it because there is no tutors in this deck. So.
Sorry. Go ahead. You're doing Swiftfoot Boots.
Yeah, Swiftfoot Boots is for 2. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste, and so you're gonna want to give that to something. I would probably put it on my commander to give my commander hexproof so that he stays on the battlefield.
Then we have this really cool card, Arterial Alchemy for 2 and a red. It's an enchantment that when it enters the battlefield, you create a blood token for each opponent you have. And then blood tokens you control are equipment in addition to their other types and have equipped creature gets +2, +0, and equip 2. So all those blood tokens are going to make your vampires more aggressive. You can sacrifice them when you need to or whatever. It still counts. They still act as a blood token.
Yeah. So might as well have them attached to something instead of just sitting there, right? Molten Echoes for 2 and 2 red is an enchantment, and it enters the battlefield. You get to choose a creature type, probably vampires. And whenever a non-token creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of that creature. That token gains haste, exile it at the end of the next end step. So you put a vampire out, you get to swing with its copy right away. It has this little Molten Echo. It's great. It's good for dragon decks too.
Yeah. Yeah, true enough. So the land in this deck, the formula calls for 34. There's a 37. There's 14 swamps, 11 mountain, and 13 non-basic lands. So you might want to play around with that a little bit. But there isn't a lot of, like, there's a lot of big creatures, so you might want to keep that in there. So be sure to play it a few times first and see if you actually want to take anything out. But that would be a good place you could do that in. Yeah.
And so now we get to tweak our deck, and we have a few suggestions based on what's in this deck. Of course, there's tons of things that you can do to any deck that you buy as a pre-con, and we'd love to hear what you have decided to change up, or if you have any other suggestions. These are just a few that we found. So the first one that we thought we would mention is adding Death Touch or some kind of Death Touch artifact. So if you remember back in, was it High Impact or was it other cards? Let me go find it.
I think
Vampire Dragon. He's our little 5/5 that whenever a creature is dealt damage by Vampiric Dragon, this turn dies, put a 1/1 counter on the dragon. So you want to make sure that that dragon is going to die. And if you...
Those creatures,
those creatures. Because you can do 1 damage to target creature, if you put a Death Touch artifact on this or equipment on this, then that 1 damage is automatically going to kill that creature. And you can just do that as many times as you want and make him really big. So we thought it is a tweak that would only be really useful for that dragon. So take it as you will, but if you have something like Basilisk Collar or Quietus Spike or Vorpal Sword as an example, then you might want to put one of those into the deck just to kind of like get some synergy with killing things.
Then another card that we thought needs to be in here is a new card that just came out with the set. It's Angie, the Maid of Dishonor. She is a 4/5 for 2, a black and a red, and I've been playing with this card a little bit. When it or another vampire enters the battlefield, create a blood token. This ability triggers only once each turn, so that's unfortunate. But you're always going to be getting a vampire out. It's amazing how many blood tokens you get. And you can pay 2 and sacrifice another creature or a blood token, and each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So she's a really good body, as well as all this blood token shenanigans that she's doing as well. Like, it's really a strong card, actually.
Yeah. We definitely thought that adding more blood token stuff to this deck, I think the deck has 6 cards in it that will create blood tokens or take advantage of blood tokens. And in a deck of 100 that the commander relies on blood tokens, we didn't think that was enough. So you are going to want to add some blood token stuff. Another one is Blood Fountain for 1, an artifact that whenever Blood Fountain enters the battlefield, you get to create a blood token. But then you can pay 3 and a black and tap and sacrifice it to return 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. So a little bit of graveyard recursion for those things that are going to be dying, and you get a blood token along with it.
And this land, someone played it against me in their vampire deck, and I was like, why didn't I put this in my deck?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's Volderan Estate. You can tap and add colorless mana, but it also says tap and pay 1 life and add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast a vampire, which you're going to have. Or pay 5 and tap this thing and create a blood token. That was like, this guy totally killed me with blood tokens. It was crazy.
Well, and it also, it's less. It's not just 5, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each vampire you control. He was like totally overwhelming me. And then he killed me with all these blood tokens. It was crazy.
It's great.
Yeah.
Volderan Bloodcaster. Speaking of Volderan Estate, this is a nice little flip card. So she comes into the battlefield. She's just kind of a little innocuous 2/1 flying vampire. When she or another non-creature you control die, or non-token creature you control dies, you get to create a blood token. But then she also has, whenever you create a blood token, if you control 5 or more blood tokens, you get to transform her. And when she's transformed, she's a flying 3/3 instead. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, up to one target blood up to one target blood token you control becomes a 2/2 black bat creature token with flying and haste, in addition to its other creature types. So it doesn't say until the end of turn, so then it stays into a blood token bat. So yeah.
Yes.
Speaking
Fun.
of overwhelming with vampires,
Exactly.
this one should almost definitely be in this deck.
Yeah. Blood Vial Purveyor for 2 and 2 black. This is a 5/6 flying trample. Big dude who says whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player creates a blood token. So they're not going to want to cast spells because whenever this guy attacks, it gets +1/+0 for each blood token defending player controls. I've been playing with this card too. It's awesome.
Yeah, speak of creating blood tokens and killing them with blood tokens. So
Yeah.
Restless Bloodseeker is another flip card. Starts off again as a little 1/3 for 2 at the beginning of your end step. If you gained life this turn, create a blood token. There's a very good chance you will. You can also then sacrifice 2 blood tokens to transform this guy. Activate only as a sorcery. It becomes a 3/3, and at the beginning of your end step, if you gained 1 life this turn, you create a blood token. And you can pay 4 and a black. Each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So it's a nice little way of draining their life while you're sitting back if you can't attack into anything as well.
Yeah. Then there is the lovely Vampire's Vengeance for 2 and a red, a new card. That's an instant that says it deals 2 damage to each non-vampire creature. Create a blood token. It's just a good little instant that gets rid of a bunch of stuff and helps you out with the blood token.
Mm-hmm. And again, I guess our final suggestion for tweaks is anything that buffs tribal. So this is very much a tribal deck. It's all vampires. So anything that allows you to say choose a creature type and then this happens. So some of the ones we often see or use are Vanquisher's Banner, Adaptive Automaton, Door of Destinies, Icon of Ancestries, and Herald's Horn. Those are just a few that you can find. There's obviously other things that are out there that buff all the vampires you control. So anything that makes your vampires bigger will be a benefit to you.
Yeah. So that's it for this time. Thank you so much for watching. We're available online and Twitch, and feel free to connect with us on Facebook or Twitter, Instagram as well. We'd love to hear how you would tweak this deck, what you're finding with these pre-con decks. And that's it for this time, and we'll see you next time. And in the meantime,
tap those magic cards and have fun doing it. Bye, guys.
Bye.